I'm going to let the panel members introduce themselves. We have Buddy Bear and Andres and David Strauss here. And as they introduce themselves, what I'm asking you guys to do, if you just share with us what your connection is with telecom network automation, and what does telecom network automation mean to you? Because it may mean different things to different people in this room. Buddy, kick it off.
Sure, Dave, thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to come up here and get a chance to speak in front of you. As far as automation is concerned, so I have responsibility for an engineering organization, an operations team, as well as a sales team. So it's kind of a unique situation in that I cover a lot of different things from product release to engineering process to operation and maintenance, if you will, of the product. So it gives us definitely an opportunity across the board to insert automation. Automation really means to improve our customer service, right? So everything we do creates an efficiency around automation, and at the end of the day, we improve our ability to serve the customer, meet their needs, their desires, their passions, their goals. This just allows us to be faster, more streamlined, higher quality. It helps on all those fronts.
All right, thanks, buddy. All right. Andres is from Infinera, as CTO for the CALA region, but go ahead and, again, same question.
Thanks for the space. Andres Madero for Infinera. Infinera is an equipment vendor. We do everything from layer 0 to layer 3, and we are heavily involved with the automation from the SDN perspective. In our portfolio, we do have orchestration and controllers, so a whole suite that will help service providers to be able to achieve that automation in their network. How I'm related to this panel, that's pretty interesting, and we were just talking a little bit before the panel, is the vision of each one of the vendors on how software is changing the architecture and the technology approach towards an operational environment in the networks is really changing. Is really moving at a very fast pace. So I'm here to kind of give you a sense of what the vendor community looks at this from an automation perspective.
Thank you, Andres. Okay, David.
Hi, I'm David Strauss, principal of Broadband Success Partners. We are a consulting firm, all ex-service provider executives, and obviously neither a vendor nor a service provider, but we work closely with them, and we also work with the investment community in terms of due diligence work of a technical nature, given our background. But as far as service or network automation is concerned, we actually did a major research project last year where we interviewed 24 service provider executives across network engineering, IT ops, as well as business services to really find out where they were in the journey around service or network automation, as far as the drivers, the challenges, the obstacles, where are they automating first, who within the organization is driving network automation. So I'll speak to some of our findings as we go through these questions.
All right. Well, David, why don't we're going to kick it back off with you. So through that study, what did you learn about why service providers are pursuing telecom network automation?
Well, we asked that question, and the primary driver, won't come as a surprise to any of you here, I'm sure, is really efficiency, operating efficiency, and the associated cost savings with that as well. We asked, actually as a multiple choice question, but I'd say about 84% of the service providers we surveyed said that was the case. And I thought it would be helpful as well to share some of the verbatims, because it really adds color to what I just said. We must address network complexity without adding sophisticated staff, as one executive noted. Swivel chair errors must be eliminated. A small team manages 16,000 devices. The only practical way to do this is through automation. And lastly, with the diameter of the network growing tremendously and a large volume of nodes, automation is key. So that gives you some insight into why they spoke about efficiency.
All right, buddy. From the service provider perspective, how would you answer that question?
So I definitely like to tell stories, so I hope you guys are okay with that from that perspective. So from a Windstream perspective, we serve consumers, residential. We have 1.2 million residential customers. We have enterprise, and we have wholesale. So we kind of cover the gamut, if you will, from a customer-based perspective. And once again, I mentioned at the beginning, from our perspective, automation helps improve that quality, that speed, kind of the expectation that the customer has for us. One of our verticals that we support is hospitals. And I had a director of IT that supports a hospital come to me one time, and she says, you support the burn center, you support the flight lifeline for when there's emergencies and really, really bad, severe accidents. You guys support all of these things. They're literally life and death situations. So the quality of your network, the quality of the service you provide, the speed at which you can provide it is life or death to us, and how we serve our customers, how we serve our patients. So when you put something like that into perspective and you start to understand your customer base and kind of the importance of what you're doing, automation becomes more relevant to you. You're kind of like, it's a necessary. I have to have this. I have to become more efficient. I have to become faster at what I do. I'm doing things that are life and death for some of my customers. So it becomes something that you start to tap into an internal drive. We all have it. We're willing to do all kinds of things when you touch that internal drive. And that's the kind of stuff that we see at Windstream. We see an opportunity to better our customer experience, to better a hospital, to better their ability to serve their patients.
So buddy, why don't you go ahead and elaborate a little bit more on that? I mean, that's a customer sharing with you a little bit. I mean, in what other ways do you see telecom network automation actually impacting the customer?
Yeah, I give you, once again, I'm a storyteller, so I apologize, but you're going to hear a lot of stories from me today. Another area that is kind of important, once again, we're a service provider that helps other service providers. We have peering relationships and things of that nature. Fiber to the tower is kind of a hot topic for most that are out there. And you all know how fiber to the tower has to be diversely supported. There can't be a fiber cut that takes a tower out. So there has to be diversity that's put into place. And we have a really good example of where we went in with one of our partner vendors and built some automation that allows us to basically kind of maintain that diversity. We have reports generated immediately when diversity is violated. Before, in order for us to maintain that diversity, it was a bit of a manual process, and we'd have to do periodic audits. And those audits would take thousands of hours, actually, over a period of time. Now we're able to kind of run this report in 15 minutes. So we took what used to be 1,000 man-hours, and now we're able to kind of produce the same kind of results, actually higher quality results, in 15 minutes. And it enables us to, once again, secure for those service providers their diversity and their integrity for their tower business. So just another example, if you will, of how it's important in maintaining quality as well.
Okay. So David, in that study you conducted, what else did you learn on how telecom network automation is impacting the customers or will impact customers?
Well, the answer I'm about to give is partially from the study, but also that study and also some other work we did. When we asked, again, the question about what is the key driver, yes, the vast majority, as I said a moment ago, did cite operating efficiency. However, the smaller providers, Tier 2, Tier 3 MSOs, for example, they really did cite customer experience as a top driver, which is interesting versus the Tier 1s who lean more toward the operating efficiency side of things. And as far as the view was, whatever we do, has to be driven by improving the customer experience itself. So it manifests itself, and it's interesting when you look at the description of this session and the use of AI and machine learning, right? If you put that into the mix as well, deployments of DAA, for example, where you're adjusting nodes, and want to do so almost on a real-time basis, that's where automation together with AI will, obviously derive today and in the future, if you will, significant benefits. Deploying new code, right? I mean, these are all ultimately customer impacting. So network automation in conjunction with some of the newer technologies can, you know, provide very positive customer results.
Okay. Again, I want to encourage everybody that you can, if you've got questions you're going to want to ask, feel free to put them on Slido to ask them in. I've prepared some questions for the panel, and as we get through those, then we're going to turn to the audience for a Q&A at that point. So I want to encourage you to go ahead and submit your questions to Slido. Andres, what are some of the biggest issues, barriers, challenges that service providers face in their telecom network automation journey from your perspective?
Well, that's pretty interesting because if you take a look at Infinera's DNA, with our recent acquisition with Corient, we have almost 20 plus years of experience in software, right? But every time we sit down with a service provider, they tell us everything they want to do. I want to do SDN, okay? And I want my network to fully automate absolutely everything that I do today. You know, take from that 1,000 hours that just Buddy was mentioning, took 15 minutes. They want to do everything, and they think this is a software package I can buy from Infinera. But it's not. It's not necessarily implemented that way. I think the biggest barrier is not seeing the practicality of SDN as an evolution. And you know, we inside Infinera, we try to quantify the effort as a practical automation, and it's little by little. SDN, we can definitely deploy a full SDN network, but you know, the chances for you to make it fully operational is going to be so disruptive that you're going to lose that executive sponsorship at some point. Or they're going to spend a lot of money there, and they're going to start asking, well, where is my benefit? Where's my return of investment? You know, but if you take a look at what, again, back to the story of Buddy, you know, if you can go back and tell them, I'm going to operationalize this little piece where it took us 1,000 hours, and now we're going to make it 15 minutes, and that's a lot shorter story. And you can monetize on that story a lot faster with your executive team. But the way you do that is definitely with automation and SDN. Mm-hmm. So I think the first barrier is, you know, as a service provider, you're trying to bite a big chunk of all of it at the same time. We have seen cases with tier 1 operators where, you know, they are implementing our solution not to do reports, but just to try to find out how many T1 circuits I do have in the network. Just trying to create that inventory, that data integrity, which is so important at this point. Just starting from zero, trying to unify the database so that you can actually understand what is the telemetry or the variables that you can abstract from that network before you do automation is a huge step. And it's a huge burden on the operational team, with the operational team as well. So I think that's the biggest challenge, and I think the way you attack this is little by little. You know, just take a little, you know, take the thing that is waking you up at 2 a.m. in the morning. I will probably say the thing that is preventing you from go to get some drinks today, which is us as a panel, and you know, try to attack that first, and then just monetize and move forward.
So Buddy, I have to ask you, as Andres was sharing that story, and
he talked about service providers, didn't he?
And having had conversations with you in the past about what you're trying to do with your network, what would you like to share or talk about before we go any farther here? In follow-up to what Andres said, what would you like to add or say or in respect to that?
Infinera is a vendor of ours, so yes, we ask a lot of our vendors and try to push the envelope when it comes to automation and being innovative. I agree, though. I think it is that continuous improvement, continuous development that's talked about a lot. That's kind of key to it, really, in keeping the momentum moving forward with the automation. So, you know, you ask what's the complication. I would say for us, being a service provider of about 70 plus companies that have come together, you can imagine legacy is kind of the anchor upon which that slows us down from moving forward. Data, having the right data to leverage and use has definitely been of an interest or maybe even a problem for us at times. So For us, we established a Hadoop lake, established our own data resource tools that we could leverage and use, but then, of course, to put the right data in there, we had to go through quite a few audits to kind of clean up the network. So it was very manual and intensive, and some things we could automate and some things we could pull via network element tools, EMSs and things of that nature. But it took a lot of work. It took a lot of man hours to kind of crisp up the data so that we could put something in the data lake that we could leverage and use to move forward with. So legacy, data. I would also say talent sometimes when you're starting to develop in certain areas. Go try to hire a data scientist right now. If you know where there's a bunch of them, please let me know and talk to me afterwards, because it's a hard resource to pull from the industry. And so the talent pool is limited in some of these key areas where you need help, where you need assistance, where you need that analytical thought process going on. So those are some key areas for us that we've been challenged in. But I agree with you that it is that continual improvement, continual development that kind of keeps the wheels in motion, keeps us moving forward. And we set small goals that are very tangible, we can see and understand, and we can celebrate, and we can keep moving forward. The last thing I'll say is focus has kind of been a big thing for us. So we bought an off-the-shelf kind of tool that helped us with some automation with regards to pushing software loads into our network elements. And we bought it, and for 6-8 months, we weren't getting much production out of it. And it came down to just the focal point for us, getting a small team that was kind of, and you'll hear that from me quite a bit. Even in this session, I'll mention small teams about 10 times. So it's very, very important. And once we established a small team with a little bit of focus and leadership, we started producing some pretty significant results.
Okay. Well, before I go to the next question, David, I guess I'd like to ask you, as far as those 24, it was 24 carriers you guys did in your study?
Well, 24 executives.
Or 24 executives.
At a dozen different
24
providers.
executives. So,
Yeah.
were there any other issues, barriers, or challenges you came across that you'd like to add to that discussion right now, or did they cover them pretty well?
I think they covered them very well. I mean, there's some gaps along the way. A significant gap was really around interoperability. So, not a surprise to anyone in this room, with each vendor, except Infinera, coming to the table with their own secret sauce, and how to get, them to play nice with one another, and issues I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So,
if I may add to that, Buddy has to do a lot with it. Yes, at the beginning, as every new technology evolves, of course, there's a lot of intellectual property from each one of the vendors.
yes.
But openness is the key here to make all of this happen. We saw it when we did disaggregation on the optical realm. Infinera has been leading that initiative. We saw it when we started to work with disaggregation on the IP realm, and definitely on automation. You have to be able to play in the same table with the other participants, because you're not always going to be the single vendor there. And that's one of the stories that I actually learned from our account team at Windstream. They told us, Windstream, they'll make you sit down with every single one of them for you to interoperate. And I think that's a great part of breaking that barrier. Now I'm going to take out my hat here from Infinera. I'm also a chair for MEF and an ONF ambassador. So from the industry, the standardization perspective, that ability for the vendors to be able to share information between them accelerates the whole process of a standardization. And that doesn't happen without the pressure of the service providers.
Okay.
Thanks, Buddy, for that.
All right. So moving on here, David. So from the study you did, so where are the service providers investing their resources to enable telecom network automation?
There were three areas that were highlighted by these executives. One was the hardware or the software to dynamically adapt to changes in the network state and service requirements. And to give you some examples of that, and then I'll get on to the other two, automation of configuring, network design, traffic monitoring platform, NOC toolkits, service assurance for correct delivery of services. The second area was analytics capabilities, right? And business intelligence, BI platform to take in arbitrary inputs, bang them together, mesh them together, get insights, simulating the impact of changes in the network, disruptions, getting telemetry and building tools to use it, alerted internally as to where to improve operations, and externally to give customers information that they so desire. And the third area were network automation and control tools. Performance-based network path decisions are part of the SD-WAN network retrofit. Multiple levels of orchestration and automation tools based on what's automated. So those were the three different areas. I'm sure these gentlemen have a perspective on, on those areas, each of them.
Okay. Andres, what do you have to add?
Oh, I mean, you mentioned all the right marketing key tools here. So I would probably say that where are they investing their resources? I would probably, from an Infinera perspective, say that they're invested in Infinera. Okay, but let me take a little of what David mentioned. Is you're looking into a network that needs to be able to correctly abstract variables, right? Telemetry, you know, what's going on with my traffic, in a much different way that we have done it for the past 10 years. Now, what do I do with that traffic? I need that network to be proactive and to be able to be programmable. So I'm, you know, hardware and software configuration. You were just mentioning that, David. So that's pretty funny because at the beginning of SDN, we were saying, oh, SDN is going to be able to reconfigure the whole network just with a click. Yeah, but I mean, you have fiber in the ground. I mean, you have products in the ground that they're not. It's not that you can disconnect a port and connect it to the next one. So that forced the vendors to start thinking about programmability in every single one of the layers. In layer 2 and layer 3, there's a lot of programmability because you can move that traffic back and forward, you can move packets, but that's not always that easy on the photonic level, on the optical level. So Infinera started designing technologies that will enable SDN to reprogram your optical network in a very practical way. And we're working in technologies now where it's going to try to mimic the traffic patterns as we see it, you know, in our service providers. Optical is no longer a point-to-point technology. It has to start behaving as a point-to-multipoint technology. But that programmability that SDN gives us from a software perspective has to be attached to the programmability of the hardware infrastructure in your network. Without any of those two, talking about automation and programmability is not really effective.
Okay. So, buddy, how does telecom network automation impact the bottom line?
So once again, I'll give you kind of a story perspective. We leveraged automation in a way to help us with optimizing our network. So there's a lot of legacy I mentioned. It can be a barrier, it can be an anchor for us. We decided to attack it with some automation. From our perspective, we were able to kind of put in some tools that enables us to see circuit flow, enables us to understand and discover what's at a particular location or POP, if you will. And so it allowed us to go in, once again, 70 companies coming together. You can see there's overlap in colo facilities, there's overlap in POPs, there's a lot of potential to create synergies. And we developed some tool sets that allow us to kind of analyze those locations quickly, pick winners and losers, and start to decom the extra locations out of our network. So we, you know, previous to us implementing this automation, the most we were able to get done was about 6 sites a year, and that's sounds pretty terrible maybe for some of the other service providers out there, but when you're, once again, talking about 70 companies that have never really integrated, there's a lot of complexities with data records and things of that nature. So once we started implementing the tool and we started to be able to track and understand circuit flow and what's existing in the systems and kind of get that deeper dive of information and data, we were able to start increasing our production to about 32, 35 sites a year. And this is multi-millions worth of dollars of savings annualized. So for us, when I think about bottom line, just in that one example, that's a huge impact for us when it comes to kind of cleaning up. And that's just a direct correlation. This is leased space, this is leased power, this is things that we're currently buying. But the operational effect of that is huge too, because instead of operating across 100 things, now it might be 50 things. So we've simplified even how our network looks and how it needs to be operated in. So we see savings in that area as well.
So Andres, what would you like to add to that from as far as the bottom line impact?
Well, one word here is key, is operation and speed. If you take it from Mud's perspective, there's going to be definitely a pressure on service providers as the erosion of that margin starts to shrink. I don't think any of the service providers here will tell the story that their margins are not shrinking. So as they shrink, they force a lot of those savings on the hardware side and the CapEx side of the vendors. But that is going to shrink into a point. So where is most of those savings going to come from moving forward? It's going to come from how do you optimize your OpEx in the network, and once you get to that optimization point, how fast can I deliver that service to it's going to be about speed, right? And what better way to do that than to automate your network?
All right, so Andres, let me ask you, where should service providers focus on automating their network? And is there one place to start?
I don't think there's a single recommendation. I think every service provider has a different recipe here. I have seen service providers who start by a single conversation of, let me try to move all my T1s to Ethernet. And how do I do that? Well, let me put an SDN tool. It's going to discover your network. It's going to do all of the configuring and the provisioning of the new services and so forth. So it's used more as a migrating tool. There's others who are saying, well, how do I optimize the way I sub-hire traffic from other service providers? I want to try to save some cost there. So SDN becomes more of a telemetry tool to try to predict the behavior of that traffic. There are others who say, well, instead of having 1,000 people at the NOC, now I get the budget to have 10 guys at the NOC. So how do I start doing that? So everyone starts from a single problem that they want to solve. Where I do think that they should start is just try to monetize, focus on that problem, and use SDN as a vehicle to solve that problem, rather than saying, oh, I'm going to deploy SDN, tell your executive team I'm going to deploy SDN in 6 months.
So, buddy, what's the service provider perspective to that?
I'll take a different approach and say, I look at it from a customer perspective, or my customer's lens, if you will. So I gave some really good examples. I'll put it in 3 categories for you. We have a legacy network, which I just gave you some examples upon how we're creating automation around that to try to improve that legacy service that we're providing. I gave you some examples with how we do software upgrades, how we're able to do a little bit quicker because of some of the tools we're doing now. So we're taking care of the current next generation stuff coming out, the new circuits that we're building for today. We're taking care of that. So we're taking care of legacy. We're taking care of the customers that are coming in today. But then there's this opportunity of the future that we're kind of developing behind. So I wouldn't mind just explaining that and what I mean by that for a second. So SD-WAN is a product set everybody's familiar with. Windstream got involved in this a couple of years ago, and we decided that it was absolutely a product set we wanted to enable and kind of produce. And so we started working with the vendors, much like was described earlier. We started working with the vendor community. We partnered up with VeloCloud. VeloCloud became VMware. And for a couple of years, we were working with them on their development of their tool. We went through some rough patches, as you can imagine, because softwares weren't exactly right, and the experience wasn't exactly right. And it was a journey, but we had that continuous improvement, continuous development that was taking place between us and the vendor. And we ultimately got to a point where we were seeing success, a lot of success, actually. I still, take claim that Windstream is one of the leaders in this space. We have over 20,000 locations with SD-WAN and over 5,000 customers. I think that's pretty significant. So what happens is we become almost like subject matter experts in this arena. And we started having other vendors coming to us asking, so what's been your success? What are you guys doing? What's different? What did you find as the pitfalls? What can you overcome? Can you help us out? We're launching ours. We did partner with another one. We partnered with Fortinet. We have a lot of firewall type of applications that we provide, so it kind of made sense to go ahead and help them launch theirs. So we partnered with them, and we've since helped them launch their product set from an SD-WAN perspective. But here's the fun fact for you, kind of the interesting take. And this, once again, we're a service provider. I had some engineers come to me on my team, and they said, hey, you know, this is really interesting what we're doing in the space. We feel like we're becoming pretty competent. There's this open source code out there. We actually think we can develop our own. So it's kind of like, great, let's go try it. So it's empowerment, right? We empower our engineers to try things. We allow them to fail and learn from their mistakes. Fail fast and don't repeat failure. So with those kind of operating principles, that's what these engineers did. In 2018, September 2018, they produced a proof of concept for us. Very rudimentary, very ugly as far as the demonstration was concerned. But they were able to demonstrate that they had developed the software that allowed them to basically do some automation, use kind of a gray box solution, and quickly in 15 minutes turn up this box remotely. So it's pretty kind of cool, you know, as far as you're eliminating the field operations, truck rolls, and things of that nature. It's kind of self-deployed at that point in time. So we're like, this is interesting. So let's take the proof of concept and let's go build some portals around it, some phone apps around it, and let's go see if we can develop this into a product set. Fast forward to September of 2019, and we've produced that. We produced a product upon which we have the applications, we have the back-end support. And once again, think simplistically, I can send a box to a customer, they scan a QR code, and within 15 minutes after they've plugged it in to the internet, they have it's all programmed, ready to go, and they're controlling from their app their QoS and everything else that's associated with it. So we started doing friendlies in the fall with internal to Windstream. Fine-tuning, once again, continuous improvement, continuous development. We're always adjusting and learning and developing. And we're launching with friendlies right now in the spring. And this will go live for us in a product set mid-year this year to our small business and kind of customer base. So that's weird, right? To hear a service provider say they just built their own software application and launch it in a way that it becomes a mainstream product set. And it's drawing a lot of attention right now, even from the vendor community, because it's really showing some future and ability to win around it. So, you know, for us, we you know, like I said, we've worked on automation to help us with legacy things. We've worked on automation to help us get faster in our current product set that we sell today. So speed to market's huge, and we've done some things to take our intervals from, you know, 90, 80 days down to 20 days in what we provide today. And then once again, what I'm just gave you an example of is us looking to the future of, all right, we sell SD-WAN today, but what can we do that's even better? And controlling our own destiny and developing some things ourselves was part of that solution. So pretty unique situation.
Okay. All right. So David, a little while ago you mentioned there might be some gaps. So what are some of the most significant gaps to achieving a more automated telecom network?
Well, one I mentioned earlier was around interoperability. And in fact, one of the executives we spoke with said the challenges around multi-vendor automation are so significant that it's actually kept many of their processes manual. So this is a very, very real issue. Before I noted, you know, the dichotomy perhaps between the tier 1 and the small tier 2, tier 3 providers, and that same split occurred when asking them about the significant gaps. And they cited, the smaller guys did, that it was more around the fact that the software, the network automation software, was not mature enough. Another thing I think that's worth noting is you can have all the right tools to execute, but there has to be some intelligence built in. So in fact, you know, as one executive put it, you know, tools will execute what they're told to do, but AI, artificial intelligence, is needed to see if a control is appropriate and to prevent mistakes. So, you know, I think we're at the sort of beginning stages, if you will, in terms of the impact that that's going to have, but that was also cited as a gap.
Okay. So Andres, his interoperability comment seemed to go hand in hand with your sharing comment earlier, I think, to a certain extent. But are any other gaps or anything you want to elaborate on in that topic?
Yeah, I think David pretty summarizes one of the main issues. As every technology evolves, there is intellectual property that creates value towards each one of the vendors. So vendors get a little jealous, right? They say, no, this is mine, right? But I think the industry is at a tipping point where openness is not an option. It's no longer an option. I mean, you have to be able to interact with each one of the components of the network to create a multi-vendor environment, to create a multi-layer environment. It's no longer about the transport people and the data people of my network. It's a single network, and it's going to converge. It's going to converge in your fixed and mobile services, but it's going to converge in every single one of those levels. I mean, Buddy mentioned as well, as David pointed out in the report, there is a necessity from the end customer to look at this from a very holistic approach. It's just a single service that has firewalls on it, that has automation on it, that has, you know, anything from layer 0 to layer 3 in a single package. So that convergence drives a necessity for openness, and I think Infinera has done a pretty good work on making sure that we are leveling the approach on each one of the service providers. You know, this is what we have. We are open. We can interrupt with each one of our competitors, and then once you level that approach, it's pretty much up to you guys to decide who has the best equipment. And I'm pretty sure we do have the best equipment.
Okay. So we've been talking a lot about the technology side, and I mean, Buddy has talked a little bit about getting people involved in developing products too, but so Buddy, digging more into the people in the organization, I mean, how do you organize for telecom network automation effort to get it done effectively and efficiently?
You heard me say earlier, small teams has kind of been a key for us. So we're a team of small teams, if you want to think of it that way. I'll go back to the SD-WAN example. When we went to deploy that initially the first year, working with VMware, or VeloCloud at the time, we struggled a bit. We struggled with performance. We struggled with our operating kind of process. And a lot of it had to do with it's a different kind of technology that involves collaboration between engineering, IT, the vendor who was helping us launch this new product set. So the skill sets were kind of all over the board on who could support and who could help. The knowledge base wasn't fully understood. Maybe the technical expertise wasn't quite where it needed to be. So we had to really kind of step back and take a look, what's the right setup from an organization perspective to support this properly. And it kind of breaks down the barriers. You know, I don't know why in this industry, but we always have these silos, right? There's the transport group, there's the IP group, there's the IT group, there's all these separate silos of individuals. And when you're in we're 11,000 employees, so we're a pretty large company. And when you have these big silos, as you can imagine, the handoffs are sometimes questionable and communication gets lost a little bit. So for us, it was one of those, you need to step back and think about how do we support this product set differently. And we made a small team. The small team consisted of people that had operational skill sets, so they knew how to do the NOC type work and the frontline kind of work. It had engineers that were more IP backbone type engineers. It had IT experts because a lot of this gear is sitting on servers and IT-like gear, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we had to have that IT influence. And then we had some developers that were in the mix because of some of the software that sits on top of it. So it was more of a mixed bag approach. And so we actually, that's how we operate today, is we have an organization that's basically an SD-WAN team that's really focused in on the deployments. I gave you how we're growing that product set from, deploying VMware to Fortinet and even our own. So that team supports all of that function. So we had to think differently about how we organized. We had to break down some of the legacy ways of thinking about how organizational structures exist. But once again, small teams has been a key factor for us. whether it's deploying SD-WAN, whether it's deploying a software automation tool that helps us push software to the network elements, whether it's how we develop automation for addressing the fiber to the tower. We've got a lot of small teams within Windstream that are really focused in on moving things and having momentum to carry things forward.
Okay. Andres, from your perspective, what input have you got on how service providers can better organize for telecom network automation effort?
Well, Buddy was just joking about trying to find a talent, right? And
I don't think that was a joke.
No, I'll take
I think that was dead serious.
It's
I'll
a
take
very serious
application,
joke. Yeah.
resumes.
And it's a fact, definitely. And if you take a look at how service providers are organizing themselves, what the new team looks like, they have experts from every single corner, from IT, from engineering, from ops. They become a single entity. Now, for us as a vendor, we also have to realize that beyond the service, the typical telecom service providers, you also have content. Now you have the content providers inputting a lot of those features requests into the products, and you have and customers also inputting. You get platforms that are building their own network by themselves, and you have niche markets that we have never seen before trying to input into, this is the type of product I need to. So before 10 years ago, you pretty much pay attention to the telecom industry, and most of the people will align to it. But today, that market is shifting a little bit for us to take input. Sometimes there are some companies who will create different product lines. This goes for the content people, this will go for the telecom people. But again, and Buddy was just mentioning this, as they evolve, they're also taking input from several parts of the industry. So for us as a vendor, making sure that we have do we take that input from each one of those sectors and embed it into a roadmap is a crucial key to make sure that we have products that are prepared for that automation.
David, let me just add to the.
Yep.
There was one other finding from the study vis-a-vis this question. So it was around the obstacles, organizationally and otherwise, associated with pursuing network automation. And not surprisingly, budget is right up there, right? Having the budget to do it. And the fact that decision makers weren't necessarily convinced of the value. But the next one was the fact that organizational change is required, right? So that does pop, not at the top, but near the top in terms of the challenges or obstacles to really embracing network automation. It's just further validation of what the two of you have just said. So.
Okay. Again, a reminder, if you've got some questions, submit them to Slido. I got one more question to ask the panel before we go to Slido. So Andres, from your vendor view, what would you consider the state of networking telemetry or the ability to get the right data in the right place for analytics, machine learning tools, and access to the right information?
Well, I think that's a key piece for automation is the way is not only defining which variables you need in the network and move beyond the typical variables of latency and how much bandwidth I have and so forth. You have to start thinking about where is my traffic coming from at 8 a.m. in the morning? Where is it at 3 p.m. in the morning? So there's a time domain to the whole equation. There is a real-time constraints when you're trying to make predictive type of approaches in a network or a cognitive network, where you have to have that streaming of information on real time. So I see a lot of networks moving from that typical polling SNMP approach from the vendors to more of a gRPC, more intelligent way of analyzing that data and combining that data with AI and creates a whole different level of prediction. Now, the way I see it is that once you have defined those variables, you really get into the point of how much automation you really want to do. I mean, this is software. And in software, you can do a lot of tricky stuff. You know, there are companies, and just Buddy was mentioning, that they're creating their own predictive rules and behavior and how their network should react. But without the right telemetry, without the right variables to abstract from, it is very hard to feed that monster. I have seen networks today where they build that AI predictive approach, and they take 30 days just to feed or not garbage information, but just raw information into the machine to try to teach them how to react. As a vendor, Infinera is heavily invested to make sure that most of the products that we conceive from the beginning does have to have that approach of flexibility. I think that from a optical realm, there's a lot of things that we need to catch up with as a whole community. And from a packet realm, there has been a lot of standardization from the beginning. So I think the packet people has really nailed this from the beginning. A lot of variables are available. But in the optical, I think we are starting to catch up, but we are not right there. I mean, we still have a lot of issues on interoperating between one vendor to the next one. And now, if you put SDN on top of it, SDN is the right glue. You know, each one of us will talk to a controller. This controller talks our own language. This controller will translate that information into a northbound interface, which can be understandable by any orchestrator. So in a way, instead of trying to make us talk between each other with a standard, using SDN is a way to bypass the whole equation. So this really speeds up the whole process.
Buddy, what would you like to add?
You know, I agree. I think I mentioned a couple things already, right? You got to have the right place to store the data. So for us, it's a Hadoop lake upon which we store the data. You have to have the right means upon which you're going to pull the data. But I think you're right. You have to have you have to pull the data that matters, right? And so I'll give you a good example. We're working with the vendor community right now from a transport perspective. One of the things we've done, once again, a collaboration type event, we're going outside of the typical vendor we work with. You know, instead of me going directly to Infinera, I'm actually going specifically to their component manufacturer, and I'm asking for their help and assistance in creating layer 0 analytics. It's there, it's already on the DSP chips, but making it accessible and available to us from a service provider perspective gives us the ability to have another level of data and information. It gives me predictive information. I can see degradation occurring on the systems, and this gives me an opportunity to be more proactive in my approach to my network, where maybe I can prevent outages from occurring. So I can start to schedule maintenance windows to replace a line card, things of that nature. So it's a whole nother level of opportunity. But once again, we're going outside of the normal means of us working with the vendor community, and we're going into the component manufacturers to start to broker the conversations of specifically what we're looking for from a data perspective. So having the right kind of data, having the streaming telemetry kind of ability, and then having the right place to store it and ultimately leverage it and use it is critically important. And that's what we've been developing over the past few years, and we've understood the value of it. Have we got it completely right? No. We're going to continue to improve and develop on that, but we see the benefits of it. And once again, it's keeping the wheels in motion all the time. So what value can we create in the near term, and how do we build upon that for the next 6 months? That's kind of the approach.
All right, thanks, buddy. All right, again, so we're gonna move to your questions now. So David, somebody here wants to know, what was the most shocking insight from your survey?
No, great question. Shocking may be a strong word for this insight, but you know, we all have been talking about network automation for some time, and I guess an insight that I wasn't expecting is the amount of decision maker resistance, if you will. They're not yet convinced of the value of network automation. So it's incumbent upon, you know, those that report to these executives within the service provider community, and it's incumbent, of course, upon the vendors as well to play an active role collaboratively to make even a stronger case, right? Because it's not an insignificant investment, and so that I would say was quote unquote shocking insight. I wasn't anticipating that because we're sort of drinking the Kool-Aid of network automation. However, the senior executives aren't necessarily willing to prioritize it high up relative to something else and fund it accordingly.
All righty. So who wants to take the next one?
I would love to.
Go for it.
This is actually, I don't know who asked this question, but this is like one of my favorite questions that I've seen in a long time because this is a real problem today. And what I mean by that is a lot of the over-top, you mentioned SD-WAN. We have UCaaS offering as well that we do over the top. There's a lot of product sets that we're starting to leverage over the top. So the internet's becoming important. You know, it used to be we maintained a private network and we kind of controlled our own capacity. And it was easy as far as understanding and predicting to some degree. Now, we're trying to predict and understand the capacity growth necessary in the internet to support the over-the-top applications. So there's a lot of experiences that are going on right now, and we're seeing the impact of it. The one that took place last fall was this little thing called Disney Plus. When Disney Plus hit the network, we watched a lot of transit capacity. So this is the capacity upon which all these service providers broker themselves, right? This is how we exchange internet traffic between ourselves. We watched that transit capacity get maxed out. There's a lot of direct peering out there even. And Akamai, who supports the Disney Plus product set, we watched our pipes to Akamai basically triple in 4 months. So triple being that the most we've ever seen, the most we've ever turned up in a 4-month period because of Disney Plus. So you got Disney Plus, you've got Call of Duty. Call of Duty pushed a software load in January upon which they messed up and kept pushing it, just occupying a ton of capacity in the internet. And we saw literally some transit pipes to other service providers, they got full. They became full and traffic was being dropped. So that question is important from an industry perspective for us to solve. There's going to have to be more direct peering. That's absolutely going to have to take place for the over-the-top applications to work properly. But there needs to be almost like a community of interest in how we manage and exchange this capacity. Or in this case, the question being asked, how do we automate the ordering between? This is a great question. The industry hasn't solved it completely yet, but we're feeling the impacts of the need right now. So it's not totally resolved, but I believe it's kind of like MEF 3, right? We're going to see some automation and ability to exchange traffic through software in that particular. There's going to have to be something like that, but on a larger scale with transit and with direct peering. But that's a need of the industry. That's absolutely something that's going to take place. In the meantime, there's a lot of collaboration that has to take place with our direct peering relationships, a lot of communication take place with our transit providers, and everybody's going to have to do their part in maintaining those pipes until we get to this point of having an ability to see it completely and automate the flow of it. So great question. That's just my perspective in recent events that I've seen take place, but it continues to be an area of concern.
Okay.
David, if I may add to that, from a MEF perspective, I definitely agree with Buddy. We are seeing the necessity, and I mean, we are pushing Sonata as one of the approaches to it. I mean, we're doing a lot of tricky stuff here that is going to definitely help the community with that, and inner service place in between you guys. From a vendor perspective, I think it's not only placing the order, it's making sure you guys have the pipes there and a flexibility to turn up the pipes at demand. So at Infinera, we came up with this idea of software-defined capacity, where instead of you trying to buy a single card and bring it into your node and having it shipped and have it installed and having it provisioned to fiber, we're trying to sell capacity in the concept of licensing, where you can pretty much turn up bandwidth in a matter of hours if you wanted to. So by doing that approach, we give the flexibility to the service provider to throttle up at any point without physical intervention of the network. So when you talk about doing that automation of between carriers, you also have to start thinking about what does this really impact on the infrastructure level for me be able to place those orders as we speak. And thanks to Mini Joda here, who when they deployed Disney Plus, that's a great example of what you can expect. But if you throttle back a couple of years before, when the Pokemon game came up to be, that also broke the network. And if you think about it, there's always going to be that variable, that surprise in the network where you didn't expect that to happen. And with our products having that ability of having software-defined networking, or instant bandwidth as we call it, you are able to actually increase the bandwidth on demand.
Cool. Who wants to take the next one?
I think it actually goes in with what you were just describing to some degree, because I think from a service provider perspective, with that kind of application and that ability, this gives me the chance to create portal views into customer realm and allows them to start to control the bandwidth, up, down, location. They can start to self-provision across pipes at that point in time. So what Andre was describing really enables some of that ability.
How close are we to it, how far away is it?
Oh, it's out there. It's available. It's
well, you guys have it in the network.
Yeah, it's very doable. It's what we find is, like, specifically around wavelengths, for instance. We can set that up in a lot of locations for people, and they can kind of adjust on their own. But what we find to be kind of an area that still needs a little bit of help is the physical cross-connect in some cases. Kind of holds them back a little bit from being able to use the full abilities and automation that we have available to them today. But it's there. It's today. You just have to, have a little bit of a forward thinking and establish some of the physical components as well.
Well, the next one's for you, buddy.
Yeah, so specifically around the orchestration, I don't mind. Once again, this goes back to the comment that was made earlier by Andrea. We got to have some collaboration from the vendor community. So today, we have the orchestration from Infinera. We have the orchestration Blue Planet from Ciena. So there is a couple different levels of orchestration that we have within the company and vendors we use within the company because of the need of being more open. But for now, it's been something we've been able to leverage and use, and we absolutely brought Infinera and Ciena to the table and had a discussion on how this works and how it should work. So once again, collaboration, whether it's us bringing vendors together or a vendor and a component manufacturer or a customer and a vendor. We're finding the collaboration has to take place no matter what. Going back to your comment, open is necessary for this to succeed.
Mark, let's see here. Well, they took one away from us. Okay, that's all right. Who wants to take this next one? Who wants to take Julia's question?
I can take it if you want, but I don't think it's an option.
Do you want to say the question?
Yeah. Well, the question is, will companies that don't level up and achieve operational excellence survive in the 5G era? I don't think you get to deploy 5G without having to take a look at your operations. The scale where you see the deployment of 5G requires you to rethink the way you're doing your network. So I don't think it's even an option. You have to really think about, where do I speed up my deployment processes? Where do we create tools that is going to help us provision even faster? How do we adapt the network? If you think about it, when I'm driving my car there at my beautiful Tampa Bay, what we found is my wife is my kids don't know what a advertisement through cable is, and they will never know that. And one is streaming through Netflix, the other one is streaming. So it's all about mobility for them. But if you think about what the impact does this to the network is, as you move along that street, the demand of that traffic is also moving through those towers as well. So now you have a traffic pattern which is changing, and then that includes a whole new variable to the equation. Now, if you don't think about that when you are deploying your next 5G network stage, you're definitely going to be behind.
So they brought back the question. So David, I'm just curious, from your guys' study, did you guys uncover anything to answer that question?
The question being, are there business drivers for the tier 2, 3 operators to automate field services operations. We didn't know, my recollection is we didn't actually see, we didn't see anything that spoke to automating field service operations per se. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I mean, you go back to my comment earlier about reducing swivel chair errors, so I don't know if you would characterize that within field service operations. I think you would. And so automation would certainly, so yeah, I mean, the answer to this question is yes, the automation will allow greater efficiencies and allow you to, you heard what I said earlier about one executive having to manage 16,000 nodes, right? And how it is that automation will take or allow them, I guess, to remove manual processes to do that far more efficiently, I should say. So, where are they in field transformation? Is that the other part of the question? If there, yeah. So the question is, was there a transformation within the field operations itself? Yeah. So no one per se used the term transformation, but I think that's probably a pretty good word to characterize it, because it is a massive change that's going on and will continue to go on to automate those field activities.
Buddy, you got anything to add to that top one?
I think I cited an example upon where even from an SD-WAN perspective, we're finding an application upon which we can automate and not do truck rolls.
Right.
That's important, right? It absolutely increases the speed to market. We have other cases upon which you use automation, you use technology to help with the organization of when a field tech's going to a location. It coordinates with the individual. So now they have, the customer sees that they're going to be there within the hour, and they see the map of where the driver is coming in. I mean, that's just a simple automation with GPS incorporated in, but it creates a user experience that's more appreciated, right? So there's things like that that we tie in. There's apps that we've created to finding spares in our network. As you know, there's a lot of field ops like to put their spares in trucks and pockets and under desk and everything else. That's fine, but let's have an app upon which we can locate it when it's needed. And so there's applications like that that's improved the experience of locating that spare and getting that spare in place, which also ultimately reduces our mean time to repair.
So these remaining questions here, David, which one would you like to?
Well, I think there was an M&A question there, which I'm not qualified.
Okay, the second one down, the M&A
I'm not
question, you want to pull that to the top, Georgia?
Yeah, no, the question specifically is, will, the odds of an M&A opportunity increase as a result of greater operational efficiency? I think from the prior panels we've heard that's actually very much a factor, as they're looking at the performance of the system. No doubt operational efficiency would play into it, and you'd have to ask somebody who actually is in that world where that rank orders, but no doubt it's a factor. I don't know if others want to weigh in on that one.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Okay.
So, Buddy, which of these next four jump out at you?
I'll answer the last question there around edge computing infrastructure and the requirements to meet low latency, just so that they don't get missed, since it was the last question.
It's at the top now.
It's at the top now. I did it just for whoever that was. I think that's an interesting one that's also kind of morphing and changing. So another area where there's a lot of collaboration that's taken place. If I look at Akamai, the one I gave the example on earlier, and kind of their expanded reach and their impact in the industry right now, they themselves are going through a kind of change in how they're placing their routers, and they're pushing caching closer to the edge. That's kind of key in my book. You're going to have to push the caching closer to the edge to reduce the core infrastructure needed for that use, if you will, for that particular consumer that's pulling on that data requirement. Limiting the core limits the latency demand sets. It makes a better experience all around. So as the content guys are pushing the caching closer to the edge, we, the service providers, are trying to enable that, whether that be space, power, whether that be there's still transport that's needed from that edge play. There's access, of course, to the customer. So we still have a play in that, but I think it's important what we're seeing, at least, that continued effort to push closer to the edge is important to reduce that latency demand set. And once again, the capacity is growing at such an exponential rate right now. You kind of understand the economics behind pushing to the edge and how that can benefit everybody.
Yeah, let me, if I could add to that, it's interesting because we're in the midst of a research project right now around edge computing. And what we're finding, we haven't finalized the report just yet, but we're finding that they're all moving obviously in this direction to meet the latency requirements, whether it's going to be, and it can be a number of different use cases, autonomous vehicles, AR, VR, massive IoT in the healthcare field, for example. But the movement of the network or the movement of the compute, some have noted it's in the regional data center. Others have noted we want to get it to the hub sites, but we're starting in the master head ends and in the head ends because of the capital requirements to get it out to the hub site. But ultimately, the demands, consumer demands, commercial demands, and the various applications are certainly pushing it, as close to the customer as possible, as this question notes, to meet those low latency, ultra low latency needs.
Okay. Somebody want to volunteer for this next one, the small provider question?
I'll take that.
Okay.
Definitely. Yes, you buy Infinera. That's the most affordable way to do it. Now,
of course.
I think what you're looking for, regardless of your size, is a modular, scalable approach. You're not going to buy the whole thing day one. You want to make sure that the vendor you're selecting enables you to have those little steps, practical automation as you move forward. So deploying a automated layer 2 provisioning requires several things. Requires you to have a standardized layer 2 network that will let you have those APIs or the way you have a information model or YAG model so that you are able to talk to those products. It requires you to have a visibility of end-to-end of that network for you to be able to create those services. But those things come as an evolution path little by little. So at the end, I don't think there is a one software you buy and everything comes into place. I think it's a good, affordable approach will be make sure you have the way to buy little by little that software. And as you move along through the process, you're able to complete the whole equation.
Buddy, you got any advice on how they might go about doing this if you were in their shoes?
I agree with its small increments, but I would also challenge one of the things we've done internally, because we build everything with an ROI model, right? We have to have some kind of return on any investment. That's important. But one of the things we've done is we've done some internal development. I mean, hiring one person that can think a little bit different and can help create small tool sets that can automate, maybe it's a process, or maybe it's a way you maintain operations. Small little increments like that, you'd be surprised at how monumental the steps will move you forward. I was part of a startup company. Actually, there's a gentleman in here that was part of the startup company with me in here, but I was part of a startup company, and we had about 100 employees, and we had 4 developers, and the 4 developers created some of the most amazing automated tools that I've still yet to see, and this was in 2006. Greenfield applications with no legacy gear, so it's kind of nice to have a fresh start and perspective, but they built things that enabled us to have seamless integration across all of our OSS, BSS. So you could click anywhere, start with a ticket, and you could find out everything about that customer, how many maintenance windows they've ever had, how many pieces of gear they touch in the network. You could find anything and everything out. That was 4 developers that created those solutions for us in that period of time.
And how many employees in the company at the time?
We had 100 employees, a little about around 115. So small company, so I think it matches this question.
Exactly.
4 developers that changed everything for us and created a value prop to some Fortune 500 companies that caused us to be successful in the space. And we developed custom solutions for a lot of companies that you've heard of. So it's you'd be surprised what you could do internally with a small force.
All right. We've got a few minutes left here that we can wrap up on. Someone want to volunteer for that top question?
I can take a shot at that. I think multi-layer solutions if you talk about automation, you need to start thinking how you have two type of customers, right? You have a customer for automation that goes with your end customer. They're asking for you to be able to do an end-to-end provisioning. But there's also a not very well-known customer, which is the internal customer. And for us, you have let's suppose you're going to provision a network on layer 3, and you don't have enough bandwidth. Now, my layer 3 could be able to ask my layer 0, my optical layer, you know what? Hey, I need a new lambda. I need a new optical channel. Can you please provision a new channel so that I can comply with that end customer? So there is an internal demand between those layers that inherently is going to happen in automation. Now, if you enable that interconnection between those layers, you are fully automating not only the end-to-end provision of a circuit, but also the resources of each one of those layers between them. I can take variables from layer 3, from my IP layer, and use those variables of IP to manipulate or to change, transform the optical layer. I can take things that happen on the optical layer and actually ask the IP layer to react to it. So now you have inner exchange of variables between the different layers, regardless of where they come from.
Who wants to close out the last question?
I think
Mr. Meff?
You're making me, keep them away from the drinks. So, yeah, I'll take.
You're standing between this crowd and
I know.
happy hour.
I'll make it short.
That's a Windstream happy hour.
Yeah, there you go. So, where do I see the adoption level? It's already happening.
tell them the question.
Oh, the question is, can the panel comment on the adoption level that they foresee of open APIs like MEF's Sonata? As an internal guy at MEF, I can tell you that there's a lot of things going on in the adoption process of service providers that are already in place. Of course, as new technology approaches and they see it as an advantage between the service providers, they don't want to be that public about it. And it's understandable. But what I can tell you is that it is already part of that process that is ongoing today. They are adopting Sonata, and we have seen an incredible explosion of the adoption of those APIs.
And I also think that, I mean, having been at MEF 19, I couldn't agree with you more. I also think, and we spoke about this just before the panel, is, you know, to the extent that there's a collaborative effort across the service providers and vendors in this regard, I think it'll play a big role in that as well. But this has to happen, whether it's Sonata and or something else, but this has to happen. Okay. So before we close, I just wanted to say, if anybody's interested in a copy of the network automation research I've been quoting from or citing from, just give me your business card or email me at dstrauss@broadbandsuccess.com.
All right. Well, thank you, David, Andres, and Buddy. And, as a moderator representing Axcent Networks, I would be remiss in not saying that anybody who's working on that automation network and those discussions about data problems, we'd be happy to talk with you about those.